Kenichi is an average Japanese salaryman, and one day, while overworking himself as usual, he collapses to the floor. Normally, this would be where he gets sent to another world, but in Kenichi's case, he just survives and sues his company so he can retire on a farm. Life has been going pretty well for him. However, all of a sudden, while he's making lunch for himself, he vanishes and appears in the middle of a forest. He tries looking around to figure out where he is, but all he finds is the skeleton of a fallen knight and a bunch of unfamiliar plants. Having watched a lot of anime in his lifetime, he knows this is probably an isekai adventure. To confirm it, he yells out, "Status window!" To his surprise, his status screen does indeed appear, so he is definitely stuck in another world. Honestly, he's fine with that. He checks out his status but is a bit confused since he can't see any HP bar on the screen. However, he does have his Amazon account, so he can still make as many impulsive purchases as he wants. He also has access to an item box, so he picks up a handful of weeds to test out what the item box can do. He puts the weeds in his item box and figures out that he can separate and retrieve the individual components from the items he places inside. He also decides to test out the store. Unfortunately, he still needs money to buy things. There's a prompt that says he's allowed to trade items in his item box for money, but right now, all he's got is a couple of weeds, and those aren't worth much. He has literally nothing valuable to trade for money, so at this rate, he's probably going to starve. Just then, he notices the shiny equipment on the dead knight. Since he's dead anyway, it's not like he needs it anymore. The first thing Kenichi does is buy some daily necessities and some bread from the store. Afterwards, he buries the knight's skeleton to pay his respects and leaves the area on the new bicycle he bought. He's searching for some kind of settlement so he can talk to some people and earn some money, but he has no idea where he is. For now, he decides to set up camp for the night since he's not going to find anything today. However, if he doesn't find a city soon, he plans to resell some of the things he buys from the store to gain a massive profit. If he does that, he should be able to survive and thrive in this world. But there's just one problem. Until now, Kenichi hadn't considered that it would be dangerous out in the middle of the woods once night falls. He gets surrounded by a pack of wolves, and they don't look friendly. Kenichi freaks out because he knows he's dead meat. He doesn't act fast, so he turns to his store and immediately tries to purchase the biggest gun he can find. Unfortunately, guns aren't available, so he settles for the next best thing and buys a bunch of fireworks. The fireworks scare the wolves a little, but ultimately it's not enough to get rid of them. Kenichi starts looking for something else and eventually finds a slingshot. He uses it to fire stones at the wolves. The force from the stones is so strong that it knocks a couple of the wolves out and makes the rest reconsider their options, as Kenichi clearly isn't as easy a target as they thought. Once the wolves back off, Kenichi immediately rushes over to his bike and rides into the night to get as far away from wolf territory as possible. By the next morning, Kenichi is exhausted from all the biking he did, but he still has no idea where he is. He buys a ladder and a telescope so he can climb up one of the trees and look at his surroundings. Thankfully, he manages to spot a city in the distance, so he should be able to start earning money if he heads over there. He begins the long journey through the grasslands, but as he finally makes it to the main road, he nearly ends up getting run over in the process. The guy in the cart apologizes for nearly hitting him, and since he feels bad about it, he offers to give Kenichi a ride to the city. He introduces himself as Fu, a merchant. While they ride, Fu mentions how Kenichi is dressed pretty strangely, so he asks him what he's heading to the city for. Kenichi responds, saying he plans to open a business there. Eventually, they make it through the city gates, and Fu drops Kenichi off in front of his store. Kenichi helps him unload his cargo. Fu thanks Kenichi for his help, but Kenichi is the one who should be thankful, as Fu really helped him out. To show his gratitude, he gives Fu a pouch of pepper. However, once Fu realizes what this is, he warns Kenichi not to sell it in this city. There's a spice mafia called Boba, and they have a total monopoly on the spice market, so if Kenichi tries to compete with them, they might send the infamous assassin after him. Kenichi hadn't realized that simply selling his goods could be so dangerous, so he is thankful for Fu's warnings. Fu normally wouldn't want to risk drawing the attention of Boba, but since it's a private deal between him and Kenichi, he decides to buy the pepper. Kenichi tries to tell him he doesn't have to pay for it, but Fu insists, since a merchant never accepts anything for free, because that would mean he owes Kenichi a favor. Kenichi can understand that, so he accepts Fu's payment. Kenichi walks around town for a bit and eventually finds a local inn and restaurant. He heads in and is greeted by the hostess, Alia. He tells her he is here for lodging, and she would be happy to help with that. She shows him to the front desk, where the price for one room is 1 copper coin, and payment has to be made up front. So Kenichi gives her the money. Now all Alia needs from Kenichi is for him to write his name in the contract, But Kenichi suddenly realizes that he doesn't know how to write in this country's language. Ilia notices Kenichi's strange clothing, so she asks if he's some kind of foreign ambassador. But Kenichi tells her that he's just in town because he wants to start up his own business. Ilia is supportive, but she doesn't think Kenichi will be accepted by the Merchant Guild since they require their members to be able to read, write, and do math, and he apparently can't. Kenichi is perfectly literate, but he just doesn't understand the language of this country. As for math, he's pretty good at it, so that shouldn't be a problem. Ilia doesn't believe that Kenichi really knows how to do math, so she asks him a basic multiplication problem to test him. Kenichi answers instantly, basically making him a math genius in this world. Moving on, Ilia helps him write his name down on the contract, and since Kenichi needs to learn to read and write, he asks if she could teach him how to read and write in this country's language. Kenichi sweetens the deal by offering to give her candy from another country, and she is sold. The candy is absolutely delicious, and Ilia can't believe she gets to eat it. She feels like a noble, but she fears that they might take it away from her if they found out. Her liking the candy is nice and all, but Kenichi asks if she could start teaching him already. After a while, Kenichi realizes that the language isn't too different from the one in his old world. Ilia is impressed by how quickly he has learned, and she is sure that Kenichi will be a great merchant. She can see success coming his way, so she says that she might want to be his mistress. Kenichi is quite a bit older than her, however, so he warns her that she should just forget about him. Of course, he only makes it worse by drawing a portrait of her, and Ilia is amazed. Again, this, along with the candy, makes her feel really special, so Ilia decides that she has to repay Kenichi. The next morning, Kenichi fills out the required paperwork at the Merchant Guild. The registration fee is 1 silver, but Kenichi's wallet has taken a beating, and he's down to 116,000 yen. Luckily, he's allowed to pay in installments, and he's given his guild ID. Outside, Kenichi wanders around the market to study the prices of all the goods. Kenichi then buys a mixed bag of fruit from Chaita, a banana, but he has never seen fruit like it before. His item box displays their names, but he still has no clue. Luckily, Ilia has heard of them, and she loves them. In his room, Kenichi tries to think of what his goal should be, but he ends up passing out. The next day, Kenichi uses a bunch of supplies he bought, including a hammer, to build himself a stand. Ilia is amazed by the style of clothespins he's using because the ones she uses are flimsy and always break. His are much better. Kenichi is surprised when she says they could be very valuable. A while later, Kenichi shocks some poor old lady when he summons his stand next to her. He gets everything prepared, and the lady ends up buying 5 clothespins for 1 copper. Her name is Anima, and she welcomes him to the area. After a few hours pass, Anima points out that his clothespins are selling like hotcakes. Anima's sales have picked up just by being near Kenichi, so she hopes that he never leaves. Kenichi is glad that his pins have been so profitable, but he's a savvy businessman, and he knows that imitators will eventually start selling something similar. Just then, some kid shows up, and Kenichi can instantly tell that he's someone of high status. The guy takes a look at one of Kenichi's knives, and Kenichi shows him how easily it can cut through stuff. It costs 2 silver, which is quite expensive, but the guy has never seen such a pristine blade, and is interested. The knife is a little too small for him, however, so he wonders if Kenichi has anything bigger. Kenichi searches his item shop, but it's going to be hard to find anything because of certain laws. Luckily, he manages to find a sword, and the guy is amazed by its beauty. It comes with a heavy price tag as it costs 1 gold, but the guy really wants it. He struggles with his own impulses, and Kenichi wonders if he asked for too much. This guy is clearly a big spender though, so Kenichi knows he has to make the best of it. Just then, some little cat person starts sniffing around, and some other cat people scold her for going overboard. This is Kenichi's first time seeing beast folk, so he apologizes for his reaction, and one of the cats jumps onto Kenichi's stand as she wants to buy his roof. Kenichi says it's not for sale, but he remembers that he can always buy more. The guy wants to buy 3 of them, so our boy gives him a juicy discount. He shaves off 1 copper from the total, but the cats don't have copper. They don't even seem to know math, but our boy Kenichi does, and he works it out. The cats don't trust him, but the blonde guy vouches for Kenichi, as his calculations were impeccable. With that sale done, the blonde guy says that he's ready to buy the sword. That night, Kenichi uses his earnings to pay for 5 whole nights. Elsewhere, some noble is amazed by the clothespins that her maid bought. Just then, she gets the idea to sell them at her company. She refuses to let this opportunity pass her by, so she goes to find her father. Back with our boy, he prepares to take a bath in some little tub thing he bought on Shangri-La. He finds that they have drum baths and thinks about filling it up with water and heating it over a fire. After all this buying he has been doing, Kenichi begins to wonder how the online shop even works. The light from the screen doesn't illuminate his surroundings. and he has no clue how the packages even get to him. He begins to fear that it might be some kind of scam that will eventually demand his soul as payment for its use. It's too much to figure out, so our boy just gives up. Elsewhere, we see some girl beating down on a pigeon so she can have something to eat. Just then, the girl is startled as someone calls out to her and she begs God for her not to be found. The next day, as Kenichi is setting up his store, he decides to update his inventory a little. He puts some jewelry up for sale. These aren't valuable gems by any means, but they look pretty, so he should be able to make a decent profit off them. Just then, Margaret, the maid from yesterday, shows up and says she is here to buy some more clothespins from Kenichi. He asks her how many she wants to buy, and he is surprised to hear that she wants 100, but she has the money for it, so he finalizes the sale. While he's packing up the pins for her, Margaret notices some of the jewels he set out and asks if they are made of real diamonds. Kenichi tells her the jewels are all made from polished glass, but even so they look really nice. So Margaret asks him to set one aside so she can come back and buy it later. Business goes on as usual for the rest of the day. But just as Kenichi is about to close up shop for the day, the beast folk from yesterday come back to his shop. They look pretty serious, so Kenichi worries that they might be here to beat him up. But then Mylin gets up close to his face and tells the others that she definitely smells spices coming from him. The other beast folk begin celebrating and ask Kenichi to sell them some of his spices. However, he is hesitant to do so after what he heard about the Spice Syndicate. He has no idea how they operate or what they'll do to him if they find out that he's selling spices, so he doesn't want to risk it. The beast folk keep begging him to make an exception, but the people in the area tell them that they can't expect a new guy like Kenichi to risk his business for their sake, and the beast folk seem to get the message. Kenichi can't sell them any spices, but it technically won't be breaking any rules if he just shares a meal with them. So he invites the group to come eat with him, but it's going to have to be out in the woods so he doesn't attract any negative attention. The beast folk are really happy to hear this, so later that night, they all meet Kenichi and Anima on the outskirts of town so they can begin cooking. Kenichi is about to begin cooking, and Anima asks if she can help. He tells her to cut some of the veggies for him. However, when Anima takes a look at the veggies, she can't believe how vibrant and juicy they look. Kenichi explains that he got these from a foreign country, and he can guarantee that these taste really good. While Kenichi and Anima are working on the veggies, Mylin and the other beast folk are busy in the river trying to catch some fish, and soon enough, they manage to get a decent amount. Now that all the ingredients are ready, Kenichi begins prepping the fish with the spices and throws everything in a pot to cook for a while, eventually resulting in a meal that the beast folk absolutely love. They've never tasted anything like this before, so they are really thankful for the meal. But all this good food is making them crave alcohol really badly. Anima tells them to show some restraint since alcohol is really expensive. But Kenichi sees no harm in giving them a little to drink. So, he pulls out a bottle of cheap booze and pours them a couple of glasses. But in exchange, he wants them to swear that they'll never tell a soul about the meal he made for them. Anima warns Kenichi that he's being a little too generous, but he doesn't see anything wrong with letting the beast folk enjoy themselves, especially since they seem to be good people. That night, they drink together, bathe together, and eventually fall asleep under the stars. Mylin seems to really like Kenichi now. The next morning, Kenichi returns to the inn, and Alia is a bit upset since he was out all night. Kenichi tries to explain that he was just hanging out with a couple of beast folk outside of town, but judging from the cat lady fur on his jacket, she thinks Kenichi did a lot more than just hang out. Later that day, Kenichi is setting up his shop for another day of business, but as he is doing so, Margaret shows up with Primula to visit Kenichi's shop. Kenichi is distracted by Primula's beauty at first, but then he notices Margaret standing behind her and realizes they must be here to buy that necklace. Margaret asks about yesterday, and he brings it out. Margaret pays for it before giving it to Primula so she can inspect it. With how well it is made, she's having a hard time believing that it's not made of real diamonds. She asks him if he has any more of these in stock. Kenichi buys a bunch more from his store and brings them out to show her. Primula is incredibly impressed by the quality of Kenichi's products as well as the fact that he has an item box. So, she has a request to make of him. She tells him that she is the daughter of the owner of the Mo Trading Company, and if Kenichi is willing to accompany her, she would like to introduce him to her father. Kenichi likes the idea of meeting with the owner of a major trading company, but he is hesitant to meet any big shots since it might spell trouble for him. However, Anima tells him that Primula's father is well known around town, and everyone says he's a man of good character, so Kenichi doesn't have to worry about getting into trouble with him. Since that's the case, Kenichi agrees to go with Primula. She invites him to join her in her carriage so they can go meet her father. Along the way, Primula shows him some clothespin replicas she had made, and although the wood shape was easy enough to copy, the metal clamp was too complex for her craftsman to make. Kenichi can understand why they weren't able to figure it out, because even he doesn't know how the springs are made, but he doesn't know that it's a complicated process. They eventually arrive at Primula's home, and Kenichi is amazed by how huge it is. However, compared to the houses nobles around here have, Primula says this is actually pretty small. They head inside, and Kenichi is introduced to Primula's father, Mallow. They both greet each other, and Mallow invites Kenichi to have a seat so they can begin their discussion. Once Kenichi is settled in, he shows Mallow some of the jewelry he has, and Mallow is just as impressed as Primula was. On top of that, Primula tells him that Kenichi possesses an item box, and Mallow finds this interesting because he also has one. His item box is what allowed him to build his trading company to this level in the first place. So, if used properly, he thinks Kenichi could become quite successful. Although right now, Kenichi is just using it to store his supplies. The reason Mallow wanted to meet with Kenichi is that he wants to discuss the possibility of Kenichi becoming the official supplier for the Mallow company. Kenichi had expected a proposal like this and assumes Mallow intends to market it in such a way to maximize profits. However, if that's what Mallow is after, Kenichi asks why he didn't just keep buying the items from his store for cheap and resell them later on. Mallow definitely could have done that, but that's a sneaky business tactic. If Kenichi ever found out they were reselling his goods without permission, he wouldn't be very happy about it. Also, having a direct conversation with Kenichi like this gives Mallow an edge over his competitors, who would eventually approach him as well. With that being said, Mallow would like to begin their partnership negotiations and offers to pay Kenichi 50% of the retail price for his goods. Kenichi could have negotiated for a better deal, but he's honestly okay with this since he's already making a ridiculous amount of profit from his online store. So, he accepts Mallow's offer, and the two shake hands on it. He officially signs the supply contract, and the first few items he supplies Mallow with earn him over 1,000,000 yen worth of coins. However, when Primula sees all the beautiful jewels Kenichi has in stock, she falls in love with them and asks her father if she can just buy these ones from Kenichi for herself. Mallow sees no problem with that, so Primula offers to pay him 10 gold coins for them, which is equivalent to 2,000,000 yen. For the first time since he got here, Kenichi has an 8-figure bank balance. Since he's doing so well for himself, he decides to finally begin setting things up for his quiet life and buys a home from his store. The next day, he leaves the city walls and heads out into the forest to look for a good place to set up his home. Before he left, he told Alia about his plan so she wouldn't be worried, but she thought it was a bit strange that Kenichi was willingly choosing to live out in the dangerous forest instead of staying in the city. Once he finally finds a good spot, Kenichi purchases a weed whacker and begins landscaping the area. But he runs into a problem since even though other things from his store are pretty cheap, fuel is always expensive, no matter what world you live in. There's nothing he can do about it though, so he deals with the high cost and keeps working until he has eventually cleared a path for himself to get in and out of the forest. After that, he needs to start working on getting rid of all these trees, so he buys a chainsaw and starts cutting. After several hours of hard work, Kenichi has finally managed to cut through a bunch of the trees in the area, so all that's left is to move them out of the way. However, when he tries to stuff the trees in his item box, it doesn't work. It looks like the trees are too long to fit, so he's going to have to bust out the chainsaw yen and cut them down into more manageable pieces. He eventually shortens the trees into 10-meter logs, and this way he's able to fit them in his item box, so he's almost done with the tree removal. The only thing left to do is pull out all the tree stumps, but that's going to be a lot of work, and the sun is already setting, so he decides to come back and finish up tomorrow. The next day, Kenichi returns to the forest to finish the work. After digging at the stump for a while, he realizes that this is way too much work for a middle-aged man like him. So, rather than destroy his back over this, he decides to just buy a backhoe. However, once he actually sees it, he realizes he just spent 1.2 million yen on heavy machinery because he didn't want to do manual labor. He's kind of regretting that. But at the same time, this means you won't have to work as hard, so maybe it was a worthwhile investment. He starts up the engine, but then he realizes that this thing runs on diesel and his store doesn't sell diesel at all. He starts panicking since it would be a huge waste if he couldn't use the backhoe after he spent so much money on it. He thinks for a second and realizes he could probably make his own diesel if he mixes kerosene and some additives. But when he's about to try it out, he realizes he could destroy the backhoe's engine if he gets the proportions of the mixture wrong. So, just to be safe, he decides to test out his mixture on a diesel generator first. After filling it up, he tries turning it on, and it seems to work fine. So, he knows his homemade diesel will work with the backhoe. So, he intends to return tomorrow to finish the job. In the meantime, he needs to do something about all the bugs out here. So the next day, he decides to head to a local magic shop to buy some bug-repellent magic stones. As he enters the shop, the wizard who owns it greets Kenichi and asks him where he's from since he hasn't seen him around here before. Kenichi explains that he's a foreigner who just recently set up a shop in town, and he's here because he wants to buy some bug-repellent stones. The wizard tells him that those stones cost 3 silver coins, but that's really expensive. So Kenichi tries to make a deal and offers to give the wizard 2 oranges if he can lower the price. The wizard has never seen oranges before, so he thinks they must be some kind of exotic fruit and agrees to give Kenichi a discount because of it. Later that day, Kenichi goes to talk to Anima, and she tells him that the wizard is a really knowledgeable guy, so he's a good person to have as a friend. Pretty much the exact opposite of the wanted criminal Shaga, whose wanted posters have been held up all across town. He's the leader of a notorious bandit group, so the reward for his capture is pretty big. In fact, that night Shaga organizes a raid on a carriage full of slaves that were being transported, and who knows what he plans to do with them. The next day, Kenichi heads back into the forest so he can finally use his backhoe, and he no longer regrets his purchase because not only is it making his work a lot easier, but it's also really fun now. Now nothing can stop him from fulfilling his dream of living a quiet life in the woods. But after spending so much money on the backhoe, he's dangerously close to being broke, so he's going to have to put a hold on any further construction progress. A little while later, Kenichi goes to meet with Mao and Primila again, in hopes of selling them some salt and sugar for a good profit. Mao tests the sugar, and he's certainly pleased with its quality, but he can't actually buy it off Kenichi. The state reserves all rights to sugar and salt, so Mao would get in trouble if he purchased it from an unauthorized source. On the bright side, those jewels Kenichi sold him before are selling like crazy, so Mao would like to purchase more of those immediately. The extra jewels Kenichi just sold earned him 15 gold coins, which is roughly 3 million yen. He now has enough money to finally purchase that log cabin he found in his store. He honestly still can't believe that there's a whole cabin for sale in his store, and for only 1.7 million yen too. It almost sounds too good to be true, but Kenichi isn't going to miss out on the deal, so he buys the log cabin. Unfortunately, the cabin must have been sourced from AIA because when he purchases it, he gets buried in a pile of wood planks and some instructions that he doesn't know how to follow. He takes a moment to read over the instructions manually, and just as he had feared, assembling this thing is going to be a major pain in the ass. But he has already paid for it, so he has no choice but to get it over with. As Kenichi begins building, the beast folk from earlier happen to be passing by, and as a show of gratitude, they decide to help Kenichi out with his construction. Several weeks go by, and thanks to the beast folk's help, Kenichi has been able to make steady progress on his log cabin while also keeping his stall open. In just under a month of work, the construction of the cabin is finally complete. He couldn't have gotten all this done in such a short time without the help of the beast folk, so to thank them, he organizes a nice barbecue party. However, even though the cabin is finally complete, there are still a ton of things that Kenichi has to do on his own, like painting the walls and the roof and generating electricity. It took another month to get all his necessities worked out, but once everything has finally been taken care of, Kenichi's home is completely self-sufficient. He made a fence around his house and farm, and as for electricity, he set up a couple of solar panels. Now that he has finally finished setting up his dream home, the first thing Kenichi does to celebrate is to take a nice warm bath. Although he still needs to figure out how to get indoor plumbing, he had to make several bike trips to fill up this bath. The next morning, Kenichi heads back to the inn to tell Alia that he's finally done with his forest cabin, so he won't be staying at the inn anymore. Alia is a bit surprised, since she didn't think Kenichi was serious when he said he wanted to build a house out in the forest, but she's also happy that he could achieve one of his goals, even if it means she won't get to see him as often anymore. The day after that, Kenichi wakes up in his cabin, and since the weather is so wonderful, he decides to go out and take some photos of the local flowers. However, his little joyride is cut short when he nearly gets shot by an arrow. Kenichi is so surprised that he falls off his bike, but more arrows are fired at him, so he ducks for cover behind a tree. The ones firing the arrows are seen to be some new beast folk that happen to live in the forest, and in their defense, they were out here hunting, so they instinctively attacked him. But even after realizing that Kenichi is the human who built a house in this forest, they don't care and decide to kill him anyway. Kenichi has no idea why these beast folk are attacking him, but he's not going to sit back and let them do as they please, so he reaches into his inventory and pulls out his slingshot to return fire. The beast folk get a little spooked, since they weren't expecting the weak human to fight back, and they start re-evaluating their choices. Once Kenichi throws fireworks at them and pulls out his excavator, the beast folk have no intention of waiting around to see what that thing can do, so they all run away. Kenichi is left wondering what that was all about. But just then, he notices a wounded animal crying out in pain at the base of the tree, which has been shot in the leg and probably won't last much longer unless Kenichi does something quickly. He approaches the cat, but the cat doesn't trust him, so it snarls as he gets close. Kenichi doesn't want to get bitten, so he spends a little money buying some cushion armor in case the cat tries to bite him. But as he goes to remove the arrow, the cat hardly fights back, so it must be out of stamina. This makes it a lot easier to treat the cat's wound, so he buys a bottle of alcohol to disinfect the wound, and then applies some antibiotic cream. The cat's wounds have been taken care of, but there's still no guarantee that it'll survive out in the open like this, so Kenichi decides to take it back to his house. He sets up a blanket for the cat to rest on, but it still hasn't moved a muscle since he treated it, so he's starting to worry. He hasn't seen any vets since he came to this town, but there might be some kind of healing magic he can use, so he goes to ask the wizard about it. The wizard listens to Kenichi's story and realizes he must have found a bobcat, but he doesn't understand why Kenichi would want to bother healing it, since he could easily kill it and sell its fur for a good profit. The wizard isn't going to be of much help, so Kenichi heads back outside. As he does so, Miley happens to be passing by. She jumps on him and starts sniffing around. She smells the scent of a bobcat on him, and her people see bobcats as messengers of God, so she's really excited and wants to see it for herself. She follows Kenichi back to his house, and as soon as she sees the bobcat, she can already tell that its injury was caused by the dog beast folk, so she swears to make them pay. In the meantime, the bobcat seems to be doing a bit better, but it keeps trying to lick its wound, so Kenichi is forced to stick a cone on its head. Miley is impressed by how capable Kenichi is when it comes to healthcare, so she asks him if he's a doctor. He says he just knows a bit of first aid. Miley wants to thank Kenichi for saving the bobcat, so she goes outside and does a little quick hunting to get Kenichi some bird meat. Once she brings her catch back, Kenichi grills it for their dinner. After eating, Miley is exhausted, so she asks Kenichi to let her stay here for the night. Kenichi asks her if it's all right for her to just ditch her work and spend the night here, but she's more worried about the bobcat than she is about work right now. Kenichi agrees to let her stay the night, but he only has one bed, so Miley suggests that the two of them sleep together. Miley ends up on top of Kenichi. Several days later, the cat seems to be doing a lot better, so Kenichi decides to start working on his farm. However, even though he can buy the seedlings and tools for his farm, he still has to think about his water situation because having to run down to the river every time he wants to water his crops would be a major pain to deal with. The first thing that comes to mind is for him to construct a well with a pump, but that'll have to be a job for tomorrow because he's too tired to do it today. He goes to bed. The next morning, he wakes up to the feeling of the bobcat jumping on his stomach. As much as that hurts, he's happy to see that the bobcat is so full of energy, so he takes off its cone and releases it back into the wild to live its life. Now back to that well matter. Kenichi decides to take a few days off from running his stall so he can get to work on it. He drills a hole in the ground and installs an electric pump, so he now has access to fresh water whenever he needs it. He starts filling up his bath so he can take a soak, but all of a sudden he hears Primula call out to him. He's surprised to see her here, so Primula explains that he didn't open his shop today, so she got a little worried. Miley told her about his log cabin, so she decided to visit him. She's impressed that Kenichi was able to build all of this on his own, but then she notices the giant excavator next to his house, so she asks him about it. Kenichi doesn't want to have to explain how that thing works, so he just says it's his summoned familiar to keep it simple. Primula totally believes him, but now she thinks Kenichi can do magic, so he asks her to keep this a secret when she gets back home. Speaking of which, at this time of day the city gates must have been closed already, so Primula won't be able to get home anymore. Primula is already aware of that, which is why she intends to spend the night with Kenichi. Even when Kenichi warns her that he only has one bed, she still insists that it's fine. Just then, she notices the barrel behind him, so she asks what it's for, and Kenichi explains that it's a hot bath. Primula gets excited and asks to try it out. By nightfall, Kenichi has warmed up the bath, so Primula gets in and absolutely loves the warm feeling. But the fact that she's in the middle of the woods makes her feel a little uneasy, so she starts calling for Kenichi. Kenichi tells her he's sitting right on the other side of the wall, but Primula says she would feel better if she could see him face to face. After she's done with her bath, Kenichi gives her a bathrobe to change into, and she's in love with how warm it feels. She asks Kenichi if he can sell it to her. Kenichi tells her it's not for sale, but she keeps pleading with him, so he ends up agreeing to sell her a couple of bathrobes. Kenichi then gives her a nightgown to change into for bed, and Primula can hardly believe the variety of wonderful products Kenichi has on hand. She's sure he will become the greatest merchant in the kingdom if he tried. However, Kenichi isn't interested in such a goal since it would cause a lot of trouble for him if he caught the attention of the nobles in the area. All he wants is to live a quiet life and earn enough money to be comfortable. Primula promises him that she will do whatever she can to help him maintain his quiet life. A little while later, they go to bed. But Kenichi doesn't want to repeat of what happened with Miley, so he decides to just buy a second bed for Primula for the night to avoid any funny business. Meanwhile, over in the outlaws' camp, Shaga seems to have received a job from someone really important. This could spell trouble in the future. The next morning, Kenichi takes Primula back home, and while he's there, he decides to talk with Mao about those bathrobes Primula asked about. Mo is intrigued by the strange fabric, so he thinks it will sell really well. And since they're on the topic, Kenichi decides to bring up the possibility of selling something a little more spicy. Primula certainly seems interested, but Mo shuts that idea down immediately. Just then, Margaret comes into the room to bring Mo the ledgers he had requested. Since Kenichi seems a bit curious, Mo explains that he's in the process of rewriting all the old ledgers because the Empire has just come up with a brilliant new system for tracking sales called double-entry bookkeeping. Kenichi has taken a back seat since the double-entry system was common back in Japan. This also leads him to recall something Mo said about the Empire's influence spreading faster thanks to the new inventions of a particular man. In fact, Mo was just about to go test one of the latest inventions from that man, and to Kenichi's surprise, it was a pitcher pump, the same one he already had. He already had his suspicions before this, but for someone to invent a pitcher water pump so easily would require prior knowledge of how it works, meaning there might be someone else in this world who was sent here from Japan. Kenichi is slightly worried since he now has competition. Over the next few days, Primula would occasionally visit Kenichi and spend the night at his place. But tonight is special because she's going to be traveling for a supply run tomorrow, so she won't be able to visit for a while. She asks Kenichi if he still has that spicy nightgown because she'd like to buy it from him. Kenichi asks if there's a guy she's trying to seduce, and Primula answers, saying he's the one she's after. Kenichi doesn't know how to respond to that, but he doesn't think it's right for him to have that kind of relationship with Primula, especially since he's friends with Mao and there's no way Mao would agree with Primula getting involved with an old man like him. However, Primula tells Kenichi that she already got her father's approval, so that won't be a problem. Even so, Kenichi still has way too many things going on right now, so he can't handle a relationship right now. He asks Primula if she would be willing to put the relationship discussion on hold for a while. Primula understands Kenichi's reservations, but she says she would like to share the same bed as Kenichi at least once before she leaves, even if it's just sleeping next to him. The next morning, Kenichi gets an unexpected visit from a knight, and it turns out to be the guy he sold a sword to last time. His name is Norseball. He was sent out here to investigate because there have been reports of a strange old man living in the woods, but since he already knows Kenichi, he can report back that nothing sinister is going on here. But before he leaves, Norseball tells Kenichi about some interesting news he heard recently. There's a mage in the Empire who created this wonderful condiment called mayonnaise, and he somehow defeated a dragon with it. Norseball is clearly impressed by this feat. When Kenichi hears this, there's no doubt in his mind that this mysterious man must have come from Japan. With everything he has accomplished so far, Kenichi is feeling really outclassed here.
A month passes, and Kenichi waits for Primula to return from her shopping trip because he has been looking forward to seeing her again. Suddenly, he hears a commotion in the city square, and then Primula's maid comes running to his shop to tell him about the emergency. Primula's caravan was attacked by bandits in the forest, and she has been kidnapped. Her father has gone crazy because of that, and he is begging the city adventurers to rescue his daughter while crying in the middle of the street. However, no one is ready to face Shaga, the notorious leader of the bandits, and they leave the old man to his own devices. The bystanders understand why no one dares to help Mallow because Shaga has a gang of 50 ruthless bandits. Kenichi can only watch the hopeless merchant beg people for help and wonders if he can do anything for him. Meanwhile, the bandit Shaga locks Primula in a cell, and she confronts him without fear, asking what he plans to do with her. Shaga tells her that he likes her confidence, and that he would want to do her harm, but unfortunately, he needs to sell her to a rich noble in peak condition back in the city. Mallow is begging random people to save his daughter, and eventually ends up clinging to Kenichi's feet. Overwhelmed by his emotions, Kenichi tells Mallow that he will do something about the matter. He realizes that he has said something way out of his league, but he just can't let Primula be harmed. He decides to use the shopping app to arrange a way to get her out, and asks Mallow if he can give him some money to get things started. Mallow's secretary immediately gives him a bag full of gold coins, Kenichi uses the money to buy a truck to reach Shaga's base quickly. He tells everyone to make space because he is going to use summoning magic, and then begins singing fat, juicy, and wet for dramatic effect. With that, he purchases a 2 million yen truck, and everyone is dumbfounded. Kenichi climbs onto the truck and tells them that this carriage does only what he says, so they don't need to be afraid. He then asks for any volunteers who want to ride in his carriage and launch a surprise attack on Shaga to take him down, but no one is willing to risk their lives. Suddenly, the bobcat Kenichi saved earlier comes to the truck to accompany him, and soon Mallow and the other cat people also come forward because they owe him a debt of gratitude. Kenichi immediately purchases modern weapons for them, and then says that he has enchanted them with magic to make them lighter and more durable. Soon, Nightfall arrives and tells Kenichi that he wants to join his squad because he is a glory hunter and wants to take down the notorious bandits to gain fame. After that, the old man from the general store approaches Kenichi and says that he will also join them. Kenichi initially dismisses the old man, saying that he will need medical help before they even reach their destination. However, the old man reveals that he used to be a decent adventurer back in the day. He uses fire magic to show that he still has the fire in him, and Kenichi has no problem letting him join. The next volunteer is even more shocking for Kenichi because it is Anima, who says she can't fight, but can at least provide first aid and moral support. Kenichi decides to take the old woman along because why not? He then asks if anyone else wants to join. The mob disperses because they are not interested, but Mallow asks Kenichi to take him along. Kenichi tells the old man to stay home because someone needs to prepare for Primula's welcome. After that, Kenichi registers as an adventurer and takes the quest to defeat Shaga. He then drives off to Shaga's base, uncertain if he will even return alive. But then he remembers the inspirational words from God Dissap, who said that there comes a time when a man must fight, knowing he may lose. Meanwhile, Primula meets a slave girl in the bandit camp who brings her food. Primula realizes that the girl is even more hungry than she is, so she tells her to eat the bread, and then says that they should get out of this place together when help arrives. At the same time, Kenichi and his group reach halfway to Shaga's base, and they take a break to stock up on some calories before the fight begins. After eating, Kenichi explains his strategy to everyone, and they agree with his plan. Anima suddenly realizes that she will be totally useless on the battlefield, so she decides to stay back. After that, Kenichi buys a pair of walkie-talkies and gives one to Mallow as he sends her on a recon mission. She locates the old ruins where the bandits are staying, and Kenichi tells everyone to get ready. He drives off, telling Anima to contact the guild if they don't return within 24 hours, and tell them that the quest to subdue the bandits failed. It is night by the time they reach near the bandit base, and Mayu reports that a lot of bandits are drunk and silly. Everyone gets ready to fight, but the cat men know that Kenichi has never killed a person before, so they give him something that can help him. They ask him to take a bite of the nut, and as soon as Kenichi does that, he realizes that the nut was this world's version of magic snow powder. He goes berserk, experiencing the first high of his boring life, and drives like he's taught Vin Diesel. The truck reaches near the castle, and as the guards are distracted by its lights, Mayu shoots them down. Next, they reach the castle's entrance, and the old mage blows up the gate with magic. The bandits are shocked by this, but they are too drunk to react in time as Kenichi's truck enters their base. Kenichi asks the old mage to hit them with another powerful magic, but old age has turned him into a one-pump chump. The cats see this as their chance to step up and attack the drunk bandits, who are soft targets for them. After them, Paul also steps out, oozing main character vibes, and kills the bandits effortlessly with his giant sword. One bandit sneaks behind Kenichi to attack him, but the bobcat and Mayu cover his ass. Suddenly, more bandits come out from within the ruins, and Kenichi decides it's time to join the battle. He summons his excavator and gets on it, driving it towards the bandits and massacring them with a metal claw. The bandits start getting beaten on all sides and retreat, realizing they can't win against the metal monster. Kenichi decides to dig into the building to see if he can find Primula. He opens a hole in one of the cells where other girls are being held prisoner. The slave girl is with them too, and as she sees Kenichi controlling the excavator, she thinks that God himself has come to help her. Kenichi peeks out of the excavator to see that Primula is not with the women, and then Shaga tells him to look up, because he has the girl hostage right now. He tells Kenichi and the others to stay down if they don't want Primula to die, and then tears her clothes, saying that if he knew this would happen, he would have already had his fun with her. Primula is grossed out by the bandit, but Kenichi remains calm and comes up with a plan. He purchases a military-grade laser pointer, and then softly talks to Mayu, telling her to follow the red dot on Shaga's body, and when he is blinded by it, It will be their chance to attack. He takes the laser pointer gradually up Shaga's body, and before Shaga can even suspect that something is wrong, the laser hits his eye, blinding him. Mayu immediately shoots him, but her arrow only hits Shaga's shoulder. Paul rushes to Kenichi's side, and Shaga tries to attack her rather than letting her go. But a powerful magic force pushes him to the side and throws him down the building. He finds himself right in front of Mayu, and this time, she hits a headshot, killing him. At the same time, Primula reaches Kenichi and hugs him. He is still under the effect of the magic nut and feels the sword between his legs rising, but somehow he controls his urges. After that, he sends one of the catmen to inform Anima that they succeeded. Next, he digs up a well for the girls who were kept by the bandits and arranges for clothes to wear after they take a bath. Meanwhile, he finds the slave girl lying on top of the bobcat, so he asks Primula to give her a bath too. He then buys a pair of hair-styling scissors to cut her hair, and the capitalist bit in Primula sees a business opportunity in it instantly. She clings to Kenichi, not noticing that she just dropped her towel, and asks if they can sell it in the market. The other girls remind her that she dropped her towel, and Primula instantly runs back to cover herself. After everyone is done cleaning up, Kenichi buys a cute dress for the girl who introduces herself as Anne. She also finds the letter from the noble who told Shaga to kidnap Primula, which makes everyone realize why the guild was so reluctant about taking the case. Next, they go to pick Anima up, and she gets emotional as she sees that they are all alive. They return to the bandits' hideout to spend the night, and Kenichi falls asleep with Primula and Anne sleeping next to him. In the morning, Kenichi drives everyone back to town, where the townspeople eagerly await to see if he succeeded. As his truck pulls up to town square, Primula runs into her father's arms, happy to see him again. Mallow notices Primula's high-quality dress, and she proudly tells him that Kenichi gave it to her. They both have the same thought. Mallow, realizing he hasn't properly thanked Kenichi, approaches him and expresses his gratitude for rescuing Primula. He also asks if Kenichi recovered all the goods from Shaga and his crew. Kenichi reveals that he stored everything in his item box, but instead of just loot, he has a bunch of severed heads. Before returning, the beast folk advised him to take the heads, as Shaga and his crew have a massive bounty, and proof of their deaths is required. Since the heads would start smelling, storing them in the item box was the best option. Though disturbing, Kenichi had no choice. Along with the heads, he collected stolen goods, including a bag of 100 gold coins and other valuables. He also rescued the women held captive by Shaga. Some wanted to return home, but others had lost their families and villages. Understanding their situation, Kenichi invited them to Dahlia to rebuild their lives, and they were thrilled. He then asked Anemone about her hometown, and she said it was Oru, about 800 kilometers away. Though it's a long journey, Kenichi is willing to take her home if she wants. Anemone has no intention of returning to her village since her own people sold her into slavery. Kenichi asks if she wants to come with him to Dahlia, and she excitedly agrees. He then spends time driving the rescued women to their destinations. Once finished, he heads to the guild to claim the bounty. The guild receptionist freaks out when Kenichi places a severed head in front of her, but there are 50 more. He starts pulling them out of his storage, and the guild staff has to inspect each one. While waiting, a wizard warns Kenichi that his summoning magic and large item box could attract trouble if nobles find out, so he should keep a low profile. Speaking of nobles, Norspa informs Kenichi that he's going to meet Lord Aus to expose the corrupt nobles who backed Shaga's crime ring. Later that night, the guild finally tallies the reward. 861 gold coins. Kenichi wants to split it evenly, but Anima refuses her share, saying she did nothing during the mission and was never in danger. Instead, she asks for a favor. She wants to take care of Anemone as her own, since the girl reminds her of her daughter. Kenichi agrees, confident Anima will care for Anemone. However, just minutes later, Anima loses the child. Meanwhile, Kenichi heads to Al's inn for the night, as it's too late to return to the forest. He puts out food for the bobcat, thanking it for its protection during the mission. When he enters the inn, Al gets excited to see him since it's been a long time. Elia hears a rumor about Kenichi taking down a ton of bandits and asks if it's true, but Kenichi denies it to avoid attention. She then reminds him of a supposed promise to make her his lover once his business succeeds, but Kenichi insists he made no such promise. More importantly, he asks if she has a room available, and she tells him his usual room is still open. Exhausted, Kenichi heads upstairs and falls asleep. Later that night, someone sneaks into his bed, Alia. He knows what she wants but tells her he's too tired for that. Even so, Alia insists since she rarely sees him. Just as things are about to start, they notice a child watching them. completely killing the mood. Alia returns to her room, and Anemone ends up spending the night in Kenichi's room. Knowing Anima would be worried, Kenichi looks for her at her shop but doesn't find her. He decides to finish his errands instead. First, he sells the weapons from Shaga's camp at the weapon store. Then, he sells the rest of the valuables to Malo's company for 35 gold and takes the furniture to the old man's shop for 22 gold. After splitting the loot evenly, everyone gets 12 gold. With business done, Kenichi heads home. Anemone is amazed by how beautiful his house is, but is surprised to find Anima waiting inside. Anima had been worried sick, but figured Kenichi would bring Anemone home, so she waited. However, Anemone suddenly declares that she wants to live with Kenichi instead of Anima. Confused, Anima tries to convince her otherwise, but Anemone has already made up her mind. Not wanting to force her, Anima tells Anemone she's always welcome to visit. With that, Anima heads back to town, and Kenichi takes Anemone inside. While walking back, Kenichi asks Anemone why she wants to live with him. But there's no deep reason, she just likes his food better. They take a bath together and then go to bed. This new situation will take some getting used to, but considering Anemone's age, it wouldn't be strange for Kenichi to have a daughter. As he sleeps, several cloaked men observe his house, but they do nothing for now. Life continues as usual for 2 weeks. During this time, thanks to Norsepar's role in the battle against Shaga, he is granted the title of Baron and some land. Rumor has it he's looking for a wife. Meanwhile, Kenichi had previously shown Malo and Primula a bicycle design, but they laughed at him, thinking it was ridiculous. Later, they realized the potential and apologized, even offering him 5 gold coins for the idea. Now bicycles are common in the country, and Kenichi is glad his idea made an impact. However, he can't shake the feeling of being watched. Ignoring it for now, he heads to the guild to collect the final payout and distributes the money to everyone. Despite Anima refusing a share, he still gives her some. She hesitates but accepts his kindness and gives Anemone an apple in return. Everything seems fine until Kenichi feels someone watching him again. This time, he confirms it when he spots a cloaked figure spying on him. Realizing the danger, he grabs Anemone's hand and tries to leave, but more cloaked figures start following them. He runs into an alleyway but finds himself blocked by a carriage. The cloaked men catch up and tell him their boss wants to meet him, alive. If he cooperates, they won't have to hurt him. Kenichi doesn't have much of a choice. Kenichi pretends to comply with the kidnappers, but just before they load him into the carriage, he throws firecrackers from his inventory at them. The sudden explosion causes confusion, allowing him and Anemone to crawl under the carriage and create distance. He then pulls out a crossbow and aims it at the men, threatening to shoot if they don't back off. Since they lack long-range weapons, they are forced to flee. A few moments later, Malo arrives in his carriage, having heard the commotion. He offers Kenichi and Anemone a ride, and along the way, Kenichi explains what happened. Malo suspects this was the work of a noble from the anti-monarchy faction, and suggests Kenichi seek protection from Lord Aspius. While Kenichi agrees it might be a good idea, he worries Aspius will start taxing him, and he hates taxes. Instead, he decides to leave the city altogether. Back home, Malo informs Primula about Kenichi's decision. Upset, she feels they haven't properly thanked him for everything. The bicycles became so popular that their family was granted a noble name, making them deeply indebted to Kenichi. Determined to repay him, Primula decides to leave town with him, believing he must care about her after risking his life to save her. However, when she goes to find him, she discovers that Kenichi and his entire house are already gone. Meanwhile, Kenichi is riding his new motorcycle. Along the way, he runs into Fuyu and greets him. They stop for a chat, and Fuyu learns that Kenichi became a merchant, invented bicycles, and now has a daughter. Curious, he asks where they are headed. Kenichi admits he isn't sure. They're just traveling on a journey. Wishing them luck, Fuyu watches as Kenichi and his new family ride off into the distance.